Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 16, Episode 112. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Friday, Steelers Nation. Dave, a busy day of pro weeks are wrapping up here on Friday. Did not see as much of the Pittsburgh Steelers on the Pro Day trail as we thought for a pretty marquee and eventful week, but we'll talk about who we did see and who we did not see and what it all means. I know it's Spaghetti Day over the Dave Bryan household, so it's a good Friday. How you doing, Dave?
Yeah, happy Friday to you. It is Spaghetti Day. Looking forward to that. I believe I jinxed Paul Skeens yesterday. What a very disappointing game it was for the Pirates as a whole. And boy, Cruz out there in the outfield. Somebody buy that kid some sunglasses or something.
Or a new position.
Or a new position. And man, you know what's going to end up happening with him? I thought just briefly this morning, they're going to end up trading him at some point. He's going to end up going back to shortstop, and then he's going to end up hitting like 380 for a season with like 40 home runs or something like that. But yeah, they're having trouble with that. He's the type kid too. One day he'll drive you absolutely mad, and then the next night he'll hit 3 home runs. You know, that kind of a feast and famine type of dude. But man, I was all geared up to watch that opening game day against the Mets, and they jumped out to a 2-0 lead with that Brandon Lau home run there, and you're thinking, all right, and then a couple of, you don't even get Paul Skeens out of first inning, and then the bullpen couldn't keep people off base for walks and all, and thankfully the Penguins ended up saving the day for Pittsburgh sports. That ended up being a very entertaining game against Ottawa, and one that the Pens really needed. But we're not here to talk about baseball or spaghetti or hockey or anything along those lines. But we are here to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. And man, a couple of big pro days happening the other day that I felt pretty good that at least from the early reports that we would see Mike McCarthy and or Omar Khan at one of the two. I think there was even a report early in the morning by Albert Breer, who I'm convinced wasn't even there at the Ohio State Pro Day. I think he was just kind of parroting what the Ryan Fowler kid had put out on the internet or on Twitter the night previously there. And lo and behold, the Steelers, Mike McCarthy and Omar Khan, were not visible or were not seen at either one of the Alabama or Ohio State pro days. I think we're still at one on the pro day trail for both of those, being the University of Georgia, and a lot of exciting pro days happening today on Friday. It'd be interesting to see if they show up there. I'm kind of doubting they will with this being a Friday. And then I think all that leaves us is the Indiana Pro Day next week there. So your thoughts on one Pro Day appearance from Khan and McCarthy so far, and what does it mean? And, kind of a continuation about the talk about that. And, yeah. How surprised were you that we did not see either one of those two gentlemen at Alabama or Ohio State?
At the risk of being that guy, technically Omar Khan was at a pro day yesterday. He was at the Pitt Pro Day, his literal backyard, but that really doesn't count considering it is right there. But to answer your question, very surprised. I would have bet your house at least that McCarthy and or Khan would have been at Ohio State or Alabama. They were, as you said, apparently credentialed, as were Brian Angelico and Patrick Graham, the coordinators, but none of them were there. Now, who did attend? Ohio State assistant GM Andy Weidel was there, so a pretty heavy hitter in the front office did show up, as did area scout Jim Ward, at least based on, I know you went through a ton of video, and that's all that you could glean from Pittsburgh's attendance, so we'll assume it was just Weidel and Jim Ward. So I don't know what the rationale is. I don't know what other events were going on that took priority over Pittsburgh signing up to be there and then seemingly skipping. Maybe there's a world in which they were there for the pro day dinners and just did not show up for the workout itself. That is a possibility, I suppose, but I don't know. Again, where would you have been otherwise? You weren't hosting players for visits. There are, to our knowledge, no free agent situations going on that would take your attention or time away. So it is certainly based on pro days wrapping up. The new model seems to be we're going to see the decision makers in Khan and McCarthy be a lot less active than Mike Tomlin was.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially we're really one key sighting at this point being of course the Georgia Pro Day here. Uh, you know, I guess overall, what are the chances that the Steelers would have ended up drafting one of the higher ranked Ohio State kids, especially if they stayed at 21st overall? Now, look, Ohio State has a lot of prospects. Alabama has a lot of prospects. And when you talk about Alabama specifically, there's all the whole Ty Simpson conversation. You would think, and that's dangerous to say, but if they had legitimate interest in Ty Simpson, say in the first round, that you would have seen more than just who was there, Ike Taylor, and who else?
At Alabama, we
Yeah.
have Zach Crockett, area scout Zach Crockett, and Ike Taylor put the DBs through drills.
Mhm. You would think that there would be a little bit bigger presence there, especially with Ty Simpson. So, look, we talked about going in or after Mike Tomlin stepped down and Mike McCarthy was hired, and what does this mean towards when it comes to the offseason process, and notably the pro days and pro day visits and things of that nature here? And I mean, we're getting the answer of what it means, at least on a visibility standpoint. We're going to have to use the actual draft as a learning tool of what all transpired here. Hopefully, we'll be able to build the pre-draft visitor list out to the 30 total, plus whatever local kids and whatnot come in. But for lack of my selfishness alone,
And my own selfishness, I'll
and
join you on that.
yours, especially when it comes to like position coaches as well too. You're
Mhm.
thinking to yourself, all right, maybe it's understandable. Maybe Mike McCarthy isn't a big pro day guy overall. And look, you did have the whole Bob Harlan thing mixed in here, and I don't know how much that played into maybe multiple pro days overall. But I mean, Khan obviously over the last several years has been very visible at pro days, especially along with Tomlin. Uh, I don't think we're going to have a grasp on what this really means until after the fact, and it might even take 2 or 3 cycles
Mhm.
of pre-draft process. But I guess you know, moving beyond the disappointment of not seeing Khan and McCarthy from once again from my own selfish standards is the fact that I think we've only still seen the one position coach, right? Out on the trail.
Well, 2, Tom Arth at North Dakota State, and then CJ Ayu at Michigan.
Right.
So those were the 2 that we've seen so far, but nothing from the coordinators and nothing super heavy. Arth was notable with Cole Payton and then Payton coming in for a visit. So the bottom line is they were probably going to have to lean on that pre-draft visitor list to really kind of give us our best clues for who Pittsburgh truly has interest in. And like you said, once the draft is done, once all the hay's in the barn, we'll have to go back and look and connect those dots and start identifying some trends. But as you also said, it may take a couple of years to really have some good patterns to really trust and be confident in our Blues Clues going forward. So we talked about on Wednesday. I want to revisit the conversation because there isn't a whole lot else going on for today's episode. I showed a little more critique in Pittsburgh skipping out on these pro days than you. Now that we've seen them skip out on Alabama and Ohio State, is that do you have any additional critique? Should they have been there? Is there any good reason for them not to attend?
Oh, I just think for at least from the quarterback perspective specifically, if we were to get the idea that they were going to draft a guy like Ty Simpson, I would have expected them there at the Alabama Pro Day. At least McCarthy, being as how he's the quarterback guru, quarterback whisperer, whatnot.
Wonder how many teams have drafted a first-round quarterback and not attended the workout of that quarterback. That may be an interesting study.
I don't know. I mean, obviously, it would take quite a bit of research, especially if we're going to just look back. I mean, the last 5 years per se. I mean, I suppose it's a rabbit hole we can go down, but overall, I think it feels like it's going to be more important to have these guys in for pro day visits, obviously, at this point. But once again, I don't know if I'm going to be able to wrap my head around this as far as to what is right and what is wrong until we get a couple of these drafts in the books at this point. We become so conditioned and regulated as far as what we expect in previous years and then be able to play off of that. But I mean, let's face it, on top of it here, I mean, have had the Steelers top of the drafts overall, not counting the guys that are first rounders that are still in Pittsburgh at this point, which is obviously still playing out with guys like Harmon and Tyson and these recent guys. But this team overall, you just look at the fifth year options and all, and look in totality of the last, I don't know, 10 years of or at least going back to TJ Watt, of how this team has drafted with their first round draft picks and the quote unquote kind of hit rate, if you will. But yet they were at those pro days.
Yeah. So the point could be Pittsburgh wasn't benefiting from going to these pro days. They weren't having a ton of success at the top of the draft. So maybe doing something different, or maybe it's not a big deal if they don't show up to some of these pro days. And I will say, as I've said before, the last two first-round picks, Fautanu and Harmon, Pittsburgh did not have a decision-maker at that pro day. Those guys came in for visits. But you would think if Ty Simpson was the apple of their eye or somebody they were strongly considering, you're at that pro day, you're watching him work out, you're watching him interact with teammates, it'd be unusual for them not to send a heavy hitter, and not even Andy Weidel, who went to Ohio State instead. Now, in fairness, at Alabama, I believe only one GM in the entire NFL attended the workout. That was Ryan Poles of the Bears. I'm not sure how many head coaches showed up. I think a couple. So this was not super well attended by the NFL at large. I think most did end up going to Ohio State, where Andy Weidel attended. So take that for whatever it's worth. But I always think there's value in boots on the ground and being there and having all the information possible to not just know who you're going to take, but who you're not going to take. Mike Tomlin talked about whenever he would go to pro days, there were multi-pronged purposes to learn about the prospects, but then learn about next year's class and talk to the social media guy for the school and how that's evolving and changing to find ways to connect and interact and understand players that will be coming up through the college ranks to the NFL. So there's a lot of value, I still think, in going to these pro days. So selfishly, as you said, we would love for these guys to be at 8 different places to have more things to write about and talk about and more Blues Clues out there. But I do think truly, even putting my own bias aside, there is value in going to these pro days. I'm disappointed to not see these guys be very active on the trail.
I said Tyson. I meant Troy. I'm sitting here with Tyson from Arizona State film pulled up here. So my
maybe he'll be the pick this year. Maybe that's
I don't think. And that's another road I want to go down today with the wide receivers here in a minute. But once again, I think we are. I think the giant takeaway here, at least at this point, with really 2 notable pro days left at this point today, and I think Monday with Indiana, is the fact, is Indiana Monday or Tuesday?
It's, I believe, April 1st, whatever day on the calendar that is.
What day is that? April 1st is
Wednesday.
Wednesday. Okay, so next Wednesday. I think the main takeaway here, at least where we sit right now, especially when it comes to position coaches as well as Khan and Mike McCarthy, is the fact that we are going to have to lean heavily on, I think, all-star players, which we normally all-star, invitees, which we normally do anyway. Combine combine formal meetings, and then obviously the pre-draft visitor list there. And at this point, it would be extremely imperative, I think, and hopefully once again we can build up this list to 30 in total. I think it's imperative that this year's first round draft pick comes in for a visit here.
Agreed, and that's consistent with past years in the entire Omar Khan era. The first round pick has come in for a pre-draft visit. It used to be that Pittsburgh would go to that guy at their pro day, but even in the later Tomlin years, mentioning Broderick Jones, Derek Carvin, Troy Fautanu, they were coming to Pittsburgh. Now, they went to Georgia for the Jones Pro Day because it's Georgia, and even they went this year, so that just kind of box they always check. But the other ones, granted, they were out west in Oregon and Washington. They were having those guys come in for visits. So that still could be predictive power, but we're going to have to hear about some first-round names because as we read off the first-round list the other day, the only real candidate of the group we currently have is Denzel Boston, the receiver from Washington. Now, that list will grow, and April's usually the pretty busy time for pre-draft visits because pro days are done, and it's kind of the last thing before the draft gets started. So we'll have to hope that list fills up with some notable names in a hurry.
What is the probability percentage at this point with the pro day tape scouring that maybe we've missed a position coach or two along the way?
I'm sure we'll go back as a team and look back through the pro days that we've missed so far. There are some where I know they were at. I don't know who was sent. For example, I know they were at Arizona, but I don't know the personnel member. We may have to ask our buddies over there in that neck of the woods if they have some footage or insight for who attended, because I could not find it in my scrub through the other day. So, yeah, you never know exactly. Unless you have the list from the team, I don't think Omar Khan's going to give it away to us anytime soon. You don't know exactly every single person who was there, but we do, I think, a pretty good job trying to scour this thing and find as many people as possible.
And back to the main question there is, are they right or wrong in not attending these, specifically McCarthy and Omar Khan? I mean, we're not, we can sit here and give our opinions about whether or not what they can glean by being there, and as you said, interact with the teammates. And look, even though the quarterback workouts are all staged and planned out, coordinated, and you still, don't you want to get a sense of how those are orchestrated overall, and the quarterback's reaction, say when say a couple of his receivers drop some passes, just to get the visible. Now,
Yeah, you'll get they film it and they send it out, and teams can still get it.
Right, but to me, there is no better, there is no substitute for actually being there.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I said last episode, I think it was last episode, that obviously the tape's going to matter the most, and the pro day workout only means so much. But I think there are some exceptions, even for quarterbacks, to kind of get a feel for how the ball comes out of his hand, and just, as I've talked about before, leadership and interacting with teammates and getting to know the person. When it's your quarterback, you got to you got to turn over every stone possible to learn about this guy and be around this guy. And if you're going to draft this guy in the first round and call him your next franchise quarterback and kind of state that claim, you better have all the information and done everything possible to make you confident in declaring that, which is what you're doing when you draft a guy like that in the first round. So to me, that says Simpson won't be the guy, but we'll see if he comes in for a visit and we'll take it from there.
And when you're dealing with, you've got guys like Aller who evidently have played a lot. So and especially with him being, in state at Penn State, you probably seen a lot of him with the scouting over the years and all like that. But then you have, and really the same with Carson Beck, to a degree, because he's played so much. But then you've got other guys like Cole Payton and Simpson, obviously 1 year starter. It would make more sense to go see those guys firsthand, because you probably don't have a lot of in-game scouting over the years on guys like that like those two.
And it's just good for your head coach to go there, because he's probably not watched that guy in person before the way that a scout has for several seasons. Whether he's a 1 year starter or 4 year starter, your head coach probably has not spent a lot of time following the background of Carson Beck until you get into the draft process this year. So, that'd be nice, but as you've said before, all that matters is you get the pick right. Even if you have a different way, as long as you get the pick right and you finally have some real good hits in the first round and kind of continue the trend Pittsburgh is on, but hopefully further that with a real home run, no doubt shot, then that's all that really matters.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, so we'll sit and watch. I'm not expecting at this point. I think is Florida today?
No, Florida was yesterday or earlier this week. I'll
Florida
check
State's today, right?
I think Florida State's today. Let me look at the pro days today. And you got Daryl Jackson down there as a notable name, a defensive lineman who certainly has the build of a Pittsburgh Steelers defensive lineman. Today is Arizona State, Jordan Tyson. Is he going to work out, though? He's got the hamstring injury. I don't know if he's going to do that or if there's a private workout later on or what his plans are.
I'll be shocked if they show up out there talking about Khan and Mike McCarthy.
Could they send Adam Henry, a receivers coach? If Tyson's working out, I assume a bunch of receivers coaches will be going, but I don't know Tyson's status offhand. Florida State, Houston, Maryland, Kent State, Mississippi State, and South Dakota State are the pro days today. Charlotte is on the 29th, and a couple of Sunday pro days. Idaho, Tennessee State, the 30th. March 31st, Colorado, Tennessee is a pro day, so there's something notable there. Indiana, Nevada, April 1st, and then there's a smattering of private workouts throughout April. I know the Big Citrus, Dominique Orange from Iowa State, the nose tackle, is going to work out for scouts on April 7th, but those are typically hard to get information on who attends those events.
All right, and as far as we know, nobody's been coming in yet for a private workout for the Steelers yet.
And we'll see if that changes. Kevin Colbert had the model where they never did private workouts. Some teams will let that. Pittsburgh never held those. There's been no indication that's changing under Omar Khan. Could that change under Khan and McCarthy? It could, but right now there's no history of Pittsburgh ever conducting. I think Colbert talked about just not needing it, and then he talked about, I think one time a guy got hurt towards Achilles in a private workout, and it just seems like unnecessary risk for the players. So Pittsburgh has sworn off it in the past. We'll see if that changes this year.
All right, so the top of the show today is the news is that there's no big news, right?
The news is there. This is very random. My favorite news story, at least probably top 3. I don't know what the other 2 would be. Go type in. What would you type in? Just Chicago, no news story. There's an old news story from like Christmas Eve in early 2000 Chicago, and it's very funny because the city is dead. It's Christmas Eve. There's nothing going on, and the reporter does a whole story about there is no news, and just the way he does it is just very funny and quirky and just kind of old timey. So. Anyway, that's when you said that reminded me of that old news story that I love so much.
All right, looks like the headline there is a look back at Chicago in 2003 when there was no news on what day was it? I think it was news Christmas on Eve. Christmas. I'll have to go read that. Looks like there's a video or something attached.
It's a video. Yeah, it's a video package. It was a news story that ran on the news at the time.
All right.
Thankfully captured. Anyway, so it's a Seinfeld episode today with no news.
All right. Well, let's try to get it away. Let's get it away from the no news and let's kind of at least create some topics to talk about here.
Mm-hmm.
Wide receiver position. I've been thinking a lot about that. A lot of it stems from Warren Sharp. I think about 17 hours ago, put up a list of first-round wide receivers drafted over the last 10 years, and he's got all the teams listed and the wide receivers that were taken in the first round. Believe it or not, at this point, over the last 10 years, there have been 4 teams that have not taken at least one wide receiver in the first round in the last 10 drafts. Those teams would be the Bills, the Colts, the Rams, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And we had a talk not too terribly long ago and really probably have it annually to some degree that the last wide receiver the Steelers took in the first round was many moons ago, and that was Santonio Holmes. And with the Steelers picking 21st overall in this draft, and on the heels of this team going out trading for Michael Pittman Jr. this offseason here, and you look at this wide receiver class is okay at the top. I don't think it's over the top great by any stretch of the imagination. I kind of feel that the value in this wide receiver class, specifically when you look at what the Pittsburgh Steelers are seemingly looking for at this point now in the offseason, is probably the second or third round, probably more to the second round than anything. I guess, Mike, when you look at the name names attached, and you could obviously probably do this with every position in the NFL. Go back 10 years and look at the first round of the position group. But when you look at this wide receiver group, the first rounders overall over the last 10 years, not a lot of names jump out to you overall. And I kind of went through my head too. Can you name the wide receivers drafted, and this really uh, is insignificant in the big picture, but it's just kind of one of those quirky things to look at. Can you name the wide receivers drafted in the first round over the course of the last 10 years that have a Super Bowl ring now?
Oh, wow. Probably not. I don't even know where I would start on that. I guess Jackson Smith and Jigba as the most
Right.
recent
There you go.
example.
You got
That might
you got the recent one out of the way.
that might be the only one that I can give you. The Chiefs drafting first round receivers during their heyday. Uh, Tyreek Hill. Is he one of them?
No.
No. I'd have to really rack my brain
Yeah,
and do
Xavier
that.
Worthy, right?
Okay.
I think that's it. That's the list.
Those are the
Uh,
only two.
I believe that's the only two here, unless I'm missing someone. I tried to just go off the top of my head here, but yeah, I think those are the only two. Jackson Smith or Jackson. I all along I've been saying his first name wrong. Jackson, not Jackson. There is no S in Jackson Smith in Jigba. Think somebody pointed that out on Twitter globally not too long ago, and I thought, oh yeah, I've been saying it wrong. Or did Devontae Smith win one with the Eagles since he was drafted?
Uh,
Devonta Smith.
yeah, I believe so. When they beat the Chiefs. Yeah, he
Yeah,
won.
okay, so there's three of them then. And you look at this list, I think overall, and once again, you can find a quick list by going to Warren Sharp's Twitter feed here. Not that that means anything overall, but when you look at a lot of the names, you look at the miss rate, and then the other aspect of of the conversation I wanted to have is kind of twofold here. In today's NFL with the fifth year option, and generally, if you find a wide receiver that's worth his salt, especially a first round guy, how many of those guys end up not getting extended? In other words, how many of those guys end up playing their rookie contract out technically before going and then going into their picked up their exercise fifth year option and then getting the deal done, obviously prior to the actual fifth year going into effect. And I guess where I'm going with this overall is generally if you have any wide receiver that you draft, especially in today's NFL, especially with the fifth year option and all like that, aren't you making the decision after his third year whether or not to extend that guy and then give him the huge contract per se. I guess where I'm going with this, on top of where I'm going with this, is how much positional value is there in wide receiver in the first round unless that player can come in right away and help you get be a guy that helps put you over the top for a championship.
I mean, as you said, you could probably apply that to a lot of positions. I think there is a lot of value. We see how much receivers cost and command in trades, and I still think there's a lot of value in a first round receiver. Just to clean up something, Worthy. You said Xavier Worthy was one of those guys that had won a
I
ring.
thought he was. I mean, he was the
No,
first round guy for the Chiefs. Has he won a Super Bowl with them yet?
no, he's in his second. He just finished his
Okay.
second year,
All right.
so I think it's just Devonta Smith and
All right.
Smith and Jigba,
So it's just the two then. All right.
right?
What about the 49ers haven't won the Super Bowl, right? No. In the
No.
last Yeah, so that would rule out Ayuk, obviously. But going through the rest of the teams, I mean, I think it's very easy to go through the rest of them because a lot of them haven't even won the Super Bowl in the last 10 years. So I think it is just the two.
Okay. And while we're cleaning things up, something I misstated at least once on the podcast with Deshaun Elliott. Just a quick sidebar. I had said his contract expires after 2026 this year. It runs through 2027. I keep forgetting the terms of that 2-year extension he signed last summer that put him through 2027. So my mistake and my apologies on that. His contract is through 27. No guarantee he makes it there under the new regime, but contractually he is under contract for this year and next. Yeah, I'm not really sure on the big takeaway on receiver. I think there's still certainly value in that and in this offensive world, even though things might be shifting a little more back towards defense and ground and pound type of offense. I think the bigger question maybe to ask, if we're going to talk kind of broad strokes here, is why do some of these first round receivers fail? Is there a commonality? I think one thing for me is sometimes you see those big jump ball, contest catch college receivers who dominate with their size and physicality that doesn't translate to the NFL super well. I think back to Laquan Treadwell and N'Keal Harry and Burks from Tennessee, those types of guys that just don't have the separation and the fluidity and route running to get open consistently, and they struggle. So those guys, when I hear those types come out of the college ranks, always give me pause.
Who have been some of the more productive or I guess, highly productive wide receivers in the first round over the last 10 years per se. I think obviously jumps out at you. Justin Jefferson would be one that you would add to that list. Jamar Chase, obviously, one that you would add to that list. Trying to go through. Do you consider Devonta Smith a NFL superstar? Maybe in the same category as you would say a Justin Jefferson or a Jamar Chase, or is he kind of next tier?
No, he's definitely next tier. He's not in that tier one with those guys.
All right. What are your thoughts on Roma Dunze to this point?
Maybe similar to Devonta Smith in that category. He's not in that A tier.
All right. What about CeeDee Lamb? Obviously, he's a superstar, right?
Yeah, he would go in that tier with Chase and Jefferson.
All right. What about a guy like Jalen Waddle?
That's a good question. I think talent-wise, he's probably right up there. Maybe he's not. He's behind those three guys, but he's up there.
All right. What about Garrett Wilson?
I think same thing. I think he's been plagued by some bad quarterback play, some injuries. I think talent-wise, he's in that Waddle camp.
All right. And then I guess Mecca Abuka, obviously still a young player, but so far seems to be an extreme top tier wide receiver, right?
Yeah, he's probably, for me right now, also in that Waddle, Wilson sort of camp, but it is pretty early in his career.
All right, Smith and Jigba.
Yeah, he's a superstar.
All right, what about Jameson Williams with the Lions?
Yeah, different type, more situational, vertical guy, maybe in that Waddle camp.
All right, but there's
maybe
been, I don't know if there's anybody else on this list where you, I guess Teteroa McMillan, the jury's still out on.
Yeah, he had a really good rookie year, so I think that arrow's pointed up, but we'll keep watching.
All right. And once again, you could go through every position group in the NFL and say, look at all these first round picks. How many of those actually became superstars? And why are you focusing on wide receiver? Well, wide receiver, once again, is just generally that position that's ends up being one of the highest paid positions, especially outside of the quarterback position on the offensive side of football, right? So,
and we've seen that market really heat up since really last year. That market rocketed up.
All right, and right now, as we just mentioned, on the heels of the Smith and Jigba contract, I think it puts DK Metcalf at fifth in the NFL in average yearly value. Now let's translate this over to Steelers talk here, in the fact that if you're drafting a wide receiver in today's NFL in the first round, he is a guy that you probably want to get on the field right away and get producing. In other words, he would be a guy that you would expect to come in and make significant contributions with your team. Especially in the landscape, as we talked about, you're probably going to have to make a decision on this guy after his third year, regardless of even if he drafted him outside of the first round. But specifically, if you draft him in the first round, because of the whole fifth-year option thing and making the decision after his third year, when it comes to the fifth-year option, those kind of things there. So I guess specifically where I'm going with this is now that the Steelers have Michael Pittman Jr. in the fold, and obviously got DK Metcalf under contract for a few more years. What is the path of the Steelers drafting? Can the Steelers draft a wide receiver in the first round this year and end up getting the kind of contributions that they would need out of that first round player in 2026?
Sure, the opportunity is there. You have two clear-cut starting receivers in DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman Jr. The number 3 spot and beyond is open. You'll have Roman Wilson competing and trying to impress this new coaching staff, but certainly a role and opportunity is there for the taking. Now, if Aaron Rodgers comes back, historically he's not played great with rookies, but depending on who the rookie is, and as a number 3, not a number 1, those are different roles and different hats. So yeah, I think a first-round receiver could come in and have an impact, not a 1,000-yard season and rookie of the year and blow everybody away the way that other receivers maybe have in recent years, but somebody that could certainly contribute well in the short term and be a really good fixture for long term.
How much does the Aaron Rodgers discussion in 2026 play into that thought process, though?
Not much, if at all. This is a long-term view. You're drafting a first-round receiver or anyone for the next decade. Ideally, that's your goal and your aim. So Rodgers is not going to be part of that conversation beyond 2026, if he's even part of it for 2026. So you understand that a rookie may not have immediate, great chemistry with Rodgers. And if you get somebody who's a little more veteran, a little more experienced, you may understand that's going to help accelerate that learning curve and maybe get that guy a little more production in year one. But Rodgers is not dictating that decision. At least he shouldn't.
All right, if Rodgers is the quarterback for this team, or and this team drafts a first round wide receiver this year, do you think they could get said receiver to 45 catches?
It's hard to put numbers on things so far away, but it's not unreasonable to think they could be around there. This offense it's hard to think about that in the moment because we're not used to a number 3 receiver with 45 catches after the Arthur Smith experience and just some really lackluster offenses. But with an offense that's humming, sure, it's possible.
Okay. All right. I kind of wonder about the positional value with the current state of the Steelers, especially now that Pittman is under contract. They traded for him, and with it still, I guess, theoretically or probability wise, with Aaron Rodgers coming back, I do kind of wonder. I will say this: I am to the point right now where barring the Steelers trading up for someone like maybe a Tate in the first round, I'm don't expect me to have a wide receiver in the first round for the Steelers. And, that even includes kind of one of our favorites, Omar Cooper Jr., who really, I think at this point, I won't be overly surprised if he gets squeezed out of the first round in general and ends up being a top of the second round type of guy. I just, from where I am right now, from the state of the roster construction, from the state of looking back historically at wide receivers, specifically those that are taken, I don't know, third, fourth, fifth positionally, say if there's that many drafted in the first round, I just don't think that's the best bang for the buck for the Steelers, especially when you look at this class kind of top to bottom, especially when you talk about maybe the top 10 wide receivers in this class. I am heavily leaning to the Steelers not drafting a wide receiver in the first round, nor do I think it feels smart for them to do so.
So even in the sense of what you think they will do, you're leaning towards them not taking a receiver, even though the prevailing wisdom is the receiver's the most likely position in round one.
Okay. If that's the parameters, then yes.
Okay.
If you're asking the question, I guess in that format, kind of parlaying off of that is the fact that, or not a fact, but is the discussion of what position can the Steelers get their most bang for their buck as far as getting the player on the field and producing at a high level. What position stands out the most for the Steelers the way the roster is constructed currently?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I'm not sure how you're going to answer it. Probably would say guard is one guy that could be a plug and play if you get the right guy in the first round. I think based on Pittsburgh plugging other roster holes, there maybe no other screaming need for this team right now in terms of a guy that can come in and contribute a ton of snaps right away. So, anything else besides guard?
I think as we wait to find out more about the overall health of Broderick Jones, I think it's fair to add, just in general, say offensive linemen. Obviously, this team isn't going to draft his center, so I think that narrows it down to obviously guard and tackle. But yeah, I'd put guard up there high. What about the inside linebacker? Can especially with Queen being in his last year right now, and we've talked about the rest of the depth chart and all. Could you make a strong argument that if you were to draft an inside linebacker in the first round, that you could get that guy on the field playing a lot of snaps and helping the team out in year one?
I have a hard time understanding the plan to do that, but I'm all ears if you have a plan of how that would be laid out.
I mean, I don't have a plan. I'm just talking about theoretically, if you had a first rounder in there, could that be someone that sees a lot of time in base, say next to a Patrick Queen, with eyes of that guy becoming the green dot either later in his rookie season or obviously in starting his second season potentially after a guy like Patrick Queen could be out of the organization at that point. Could you theoretically get an inside linebacker on the field for at least 50 to 60% of the snaps this year?
I don't see the path unless you're trading Patrick Queen or giving up on Peyton Wilson. Even if you put that guy in a base role only, then that's about 30% of the snaps. I'm not sure where the rest are coming from. I don't see it.
Okay. With the cornerback position, now that they have Dean under contract going along with Joey Porter Jr., it is kind of hard to carve out a lot of playing time for a corner, right?
Yeah, I don't really see anything there immediately, but just to pull back, it's not just about how they contribute this year. You want that first round rookie to be on the field, and if he's ready to play, you want contributions right away. But this is a long term thing too, 2027 and beyond. How can this guy help you for the long haul? You want a slam dunk
Uh-huh.
pick that's going to be a superstar, that's going to really be on your team and get that second contract and help change your franchise. So I think about it in terms of year one. That's part of the equation. How can this guy help us right now? But it's also what can this guy do beyond his rookie season?
All right, but okay, going back to the original phrasing, I guess, is what position group screams that you could get the guy on the field for more than 50% of the snaps and be very integral contributor for the Steelers in 2026, specifically with the current makeup of the roster as we sit here on March 27th.
Well, like we've said, I think Pittsburgh has addressed a lot of holes in free agency to kind of make that less of an obligation, which is a good thing. You don't want to have this hole where you feel like you have to take this one position. Pittsburgh has gone down that road before and they've paid the price negatively for it, whether that's quarterback or cornerback or a bunch of other positions, safety. So I think it's not necessarily a bad thing, but are there positions where you can get a guy to have a situational role in year one? Absolutely. Whether you talk about receiver, you talk about safety, you talk about offensive line guard primarily, there's certainly opportunities for those guys to see playing time immediately.
All right, why should I not be ruling out why should I not rule out wide receiver in my head, specifically if this team stays at 21st overall in the first round?
I would respond by saying this: rank the top two needs of the Pittsburgh Steelers right now, positionally, quarterback aside.
I think guard remains, and all apologies to Brock Hoffman, who I am a big fan of. I really like the signing, but I think guard is up there. I think potentially tackle, especially not knowing, knowing what we know, and that's the quality of play of Broderick Jones, what we have seen out of Dylan Cook, and the state of the health of one Broderick Jones as well too. So I think offensive line, either guard and then tackle position, and then obviously throwing out the quarterback position. I would say I would potentially put inside linebacker next in the group. Slightly ahead of wide receiver now that this team has Pittman and DK.
But they need a number 3. Who's the number 3 for this team right now?
Yeah.
I mean, at inside linebacker, you can sit there and say you have Queen and Wilson. You have 2 starting inside linebackers. I don't know. Like, inside linebacker can be a need. There can be a long-term view to it. I'm with you there, but I think receiver has to be above inside linebacker.
Right. I think I have them real close. I would still potentially put inside linebacker.
Okay.
Slight. It would be an A and B type situation there, but
well, even granting you that point, the reason why you shouldn't discount receivers is because it's one of your top 3 needs, according to you. So if it's one of your top 3 needs, how do you discount that in a class that has a good amount of receivers probably going to go in the first round?
Well, I guess I'm hedging in the fact that I think that this team can address and fill that need with a second round player to get everything they need positionally, especially in his rookie season, and the quality of type player and the type of player that they're looking for, I feel can be had in the second round.
It may, but you never know exactly how that board's going to fall. At 53,
Right.
you're going to be waiting a while, and there can be runs on the position. I think to argue the other side and argue more your point, there are a lot of really good receivers in this draft. How many great receivers are there? And is there that guy you love at 21 that feels like that real transformative number 1, future type receiver? I think the depth of the
Especially if
class.
you're to assume that, say, the top 3 wide receivers, whatever list you want to work with, are off the board at that point.
Yeah, but even including those, are any of the top 3 receivers of the Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase caliber when they were coming out, Malik Neighbors? I don't know if I see a guy quite like that when we put together our
Right.
grades. How many guys have that 9.0, which is our grading scale for the all-pro type of grade? I think only one has been assigned, and that was Mekhi Lemon right at 9.0. Everyone else is in the 8s. And if you look at our board, which I have not put together recently, but when I did it about 3-4 weeks ago, you had a lot of guys grouped together in that 8.8, 8.4 range, and that kind of tells you, okay, there's some real good depth in this class, but there aren't maybe the high-end names. To your point, maybe you can sit there and wait, and if you have somebody like a guard that has a really, really high grade and a weaker class without as much depth, you consider that instead. So that'll be the calculation Pittsburgh will have to make, the strength of the class versus depth and, what the top of the class offers. But, certainly I still put receiver as a, real good possibility in the first round.
All right, Carnell Tate, he's a first round guy, right? And
Sure.
a guy that the Steelers probably aren't going to have an opportunity to draft at 21st overall.
Seems unlikely.
All right, Jordan Tyson, he is very he's one of the ones that's kind of really controversial in this class, and the kind of argument is what is Jordan Tyson's superpower? I guess he does a lot of things good. How many things does he do great? And then you've got the history concerns with him as well. But all that to say, he's still probably going to be a first round guy and probably a guy that's off the board by the time the Steelers pick at 21st overall.
Yeah, I think after Tate, it gets a little bit muddy and who's going to go where. We've talked about flavors and different just preferences, and so I don't know if there's a clear order after the fact. Maybe Mekhi Lemon will go second, but there's a good chance Tyson will be gone. The medical is just really tricky with him, and I don't believe he's going to work out as pro today. Just kind of researching that more mid-show. So if there's no testing on him at all in the pre-draft process, that's another thing that'll work against him.
All right, and Denzel Boston, feels like a kind of a polarizing guy, even though he's going to end up in more than likely in the first round to a team this year, right?
Yeah, we'll see where he goes. It's probably right around where Pittsburgh's picking might be his value, or below, somewhere middle to end of the first round is probably the sweet spot for Denzel Boston.
And then, as you mentioned, Mekhi Lemon, there's a chance that he could be on the board there with. I think at that point you're getting into talk about possibly at 21st overall, you're looking at probably a group that could be appetizing to the Steelers of Mekhi Lemon, maybe Denzel Boston, Casey Concepcion, and then Omar Cooper Jr., right?
Yeah, that sounds right. The point I'm just trying to make is, are there any superstar receivers in this year's class? I don't get that impression.
If there was one that you'd be willing to bet that we'd be talking about 3 years from now, 4 years from now, getting the mega extension of potential first rounders, would it be Carnell Tate that you would hedge your bet on?
I didn't write the report on him. I might go Mekhi Lemon. I like Carnell Tate a lot. He's probably one of the most high character individuals in this year's class of any prospect, and that Doesn't always come with receivers who are, have egos and can be difficult to deal with, as Pittsburgh has found out. Tate is not that at all. I like Tate a lot, but I don't love him, so I don't know if he'd be my answer.
Okay. Who would be your answer then?
Might be Mekhi Lemon. I'm a big fan of Omar Cooper Jr. I'm not sure if he'll be the superstar that gets, $30 million per year, but I think he's going to be one heck of a player in the NFL.
All right. And obviously I'm a huge fan of his as well too. But I just kind of wonder if he's kind of that guy.
What is the big concern with Omar Cooper Jr.? What is negative in Omar Cooper Jr.'s game that knocks him from being maybe that superstar?
I just think I don't think he's the kind of guy that takes over games.
What does that mean, though? I think I understand your point, but I like defining terms.
Just game on the line. You got to have it. You got to have it. Just a guy that takes over a game, a guy that's 10, 11, 12 catches, 130, 140 yards, 2 touchdowns in a game. I just don't know if he's going to be that guy at the NFL level.
But what is it's kind of tautological. Like what is preventing him from being the guy? Like I understand the point about what you're trying to say, and I would also say with game on the line, the Penn State game, talk about games on the line, the incredible catch that he made in that one. But what is preventing him from being the guy? I understand what you're saying, but why are you saying that?
I mean, it could be obviously usage, and look, they had a lot of talent over there.
Yeah. They got the kid next year, Becker, who had a great year at Surratt, so he ran the ball a lot. I mean, he had good numbers. He didn't have amazing numbers at Indiana, but he had good production.
What was his? How many? Let's look at his game log here.
You're looking for 100-yard games that he had or big games that he had? Yeah.
He had, it looks like, who was at Indiana State, 10 catches for 207 yards. He had 8 catches, 115 yards versus Michigan State. He only had 2 games. How many games over? Let's just even say 85 yards. He just had 3 of those, I think, last year. One of them against Maryland overall there. And then, yeah, I think that was it last year. What about 2024 with him? 1 game against WIU. 4 catches, 131 yards. So, he just hasn't had huge games at the college level, specifically against powerhouse, Power 4 teams, if you will.
And that's a fair point. I think that's maybe one thing to talk about. If he didn't have that production in college, will that change at the NFL level? Now, you might argue that the opportunity could be more at the NFL level, but I think that's a salient point. He had, to sum it up, he had 4 100-yard games in his entire career, and 3 of them came against Indiana State, and Western Illinois. So FCS schools. He had 1 against Michigan State in 2025, and they were not a great team either. So that may be the knock. I think just overall with Cooper, he's not the biggest guy in the world. I still don't think he's the fastest guy in the world. He ran really well and ran better than I expected, so kudos to him. But he may not be that physically dominant receiver that you get from the Justin Jeffersons and Jamar Chases of the world. I think that's probably the knock on him.
And basically what I said, a guy to take over a game, right?
Yeah, I just was trying to work to define those terms rather than just kind of the. But I think, like I said, I understood what you were trying to say. I just like being able to really nail down what exactly that means.
All right, how many career games in college did he have? Did he have 7 or more receptions in a game?
7 or more, 6, or excuse me, what is it? 5 games of 7 or more.
Okay. Now look, he phenomenal catches. He can make contested catches. He obviously played inside and outside. I think that's obviously a plus with him. But it's just part of partial reason why I kind of wonder if he's going to end up being a first round guy. Now look, once again, I my view on this wide receiver class specifically, when you talk about Steelers, it feels like the second round, because of players like him and Jeremy Bernard. I feel is a sweet spot for the Steelers where they could get the most bang for their buck when it comes to a wide receiver class this year.
Yeah, I get that. I understand the point overall, and I felt that at times myself, but we'll just see what the board looks like. Just one other point on Cooper. One reason why the numbers weren't as gaudy, when you're Indiana and you're blowing out teams repeatedly each week, you're resting guys in the fourth quarter, you're running the ball late. if they played more competitive games, they're going to throw the ball more. Maybe Cooper's numbers are higher. I mean, they won. How many games did they win in blowout fashion in 2025?
Okay.
They beat Kennesaw State, Indiana State, Illinois, Michigan State, UCLA, Maryland, Wisconsin, Purdue, the Rose Bowl against Alabama, even the Peach Bowl against Oregon became a laugher late. I mean, you're playing half your schedule. By the fourth quarter, the game's already over. Your starters are generally pulled. So that is maybe one explanation for why Cooper's numbers weren't super, super impressive.
And look, I'm not trying to box score scout here because I think he's incredibly good after the catch. I think he, once again, I in the red zone, I think he's fantastic in the red zone. I think he can run all the routes that you need him to from both the slot and the outside position. I think he's obviously got that kind of build where he's, you expect him to be kind of a Deebo Samuel type to a degree where he's going to break some tackles and get you the extra yardage. So I think he's more than just a catch guy in the NFL. I think he can function underneath. I think he can function over the top. But I do kind of wonder just and look, I mean, we obviously with Indiana being a high profile school for most of the season last year, with a lot of focus being on Mendoza, we got to see a lot of him. But he even said when you go back through those games and even the games that he excelled in, does he come off as the kind of guy that at the NFL level is going to be the takeover guy that you look back and say, man, this guy, was drafted in the second round. He should have been a top 10 guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get the overall point. So we'll see. It'll be interesting. I think receiver part of that conversation, but if Pittsburgh does not take one in the first round, the calculation might be that there's good depth in this year's class, like you said, and you wait until round 2 and then grab one there.
Am I hoping Omar Cooper Jr. ends up in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform? Absolutely, I am. I think him and Bernard, I think after doing all the work on the top guys and where they're expected to go, I think those two potentially have the chance to be the Steelers' choice at wide receiver. Now, where they indeed end up getting those two is, one of those two is obviously a different question, because I think arguments can be made, specifically later in the first round, that Omar Cooper Jr. could, for the right team, could be taken off the board in that point.
Right. So that conversation will be good. I want to see who else comes in for visits. Right now, it's just Boston that we know has one scheduled. They had a lot of combine formals and informals with position, which certainly signals interest, as there should be. So we'll see who keeps checking those boxes, and we'll see at that Pro Day, Indiana, Wednesday. Do they send? I mean, it would make sense for Adam Henry to go there. He coached at Indiana. I know it's a new coaching staff there. He wasn't part of the Cignetti regime, but still just kind of old stomping grounds. They got 2 draftable receivers. I assume a bunch of receivers coaches are going. I think Pittsburgh should be sending somebody, but we'll keep an eye on it.
All right. So I just wanted to kind of look at positional value there, because Warren Sharp's tweets taken off the last couple of days. Wanted to kind of bring that into the equation, and also the whole premier. You look at the former first round draft picks, and as we went through the list of how many are kind of that superstar or borderline superstar level there, and then you look at the fact that the Steelers do pick 21st in the league this year, and generally I think you see. I mean, there's not many times where you get down to 21, at least 2 or 3 aren't off the board when it comes to wide receivers, regardless of the class. Now, I know there have been classes in the past where the first wide receiver hasn't. When was the last time? Let's see, 20 when the first wide receiver was taken off the board. Jackson Smith and Jigba was the first wide receiver taken in the 2023 draft, and he went 20th overall. And then Quentin Johnston of the Chargers went 21st overall. And then what do you think about Zay Flowers? Has Zay Flowers lived up to his first round selection at 22 overall in 2023?
It's a fair question. I think he had a breakout year this year, with the first Ravens receiver to make a Pro Bowl in forever, I think. So I would. What overall was he taking?
22nd.
Yeah, I would say so. I think he's probably lived up. Maybe hasn't exceeded expectations, but I think he's kind of met them.
What about, we've had a few talks about Brian Thomas Jr. with the Jaguars. He was taken 23rd overall in 2024. Obviously had a real nice rookie season, and last year was kind of meh.
Yeah, you're asking me just my overall take on Brian Thomas. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a tale of 2 seasons, a great rookie year, then Liam Cohn comes in. Kind of weird that it didn't seem to work super well with Cohn, a really smart offensive guy. So we'll see what a third year looks like with him. But I think the talent is off the charts with Brian Thomas Jr. Just felt like he had some drops and just wasn't quite as locked in last year.
All right, what was the knock on Justin Jefferson coming out in 2020 that allowed him to fight? He was the 5th wide receiver taken in that draft class and 22nd overall.
Wow, that's a good question. I can't think about what the knocks were on him. I forgot he fell that far. I know the Eagles get mocked for taking Jalen Reagor. It's one of the Howie Roseman's kind of clear misses. I think there was a belief they were going to take Jefferson, and they pivoted to Reagor last second. What a mistake that was. So yeah, I'd have to go back and check the reports, but I don't recall what the issues were, unless it was just how he played with Burrow, and Burrow made him look good, and could he get that good quarterback play at the next level? Yeah, I don't remember what the big knock on Jefferson was. Did he test okay? What was his pre-draft testing?
I don't. I'm trying to just recall. I haven't gone down a rabbit hole with him to kind of remember back why. Because once again, he was the 5th wide receiver taken in that draft class. Here was that. Here was the 6 wide receivers taken in the first round that year. Henry Ruggs was the first wide receiver in that class at 12th overall. Jerry Jeudy was the second one taken at 15th overall. CD Lamb was the 17th overall. Jalen Reagor with the Eagles was 21st overall. And then Justin Jefferson, 22nd overall. And then the last of the 6 wide receivers was Brandon Ayuk at 25th overall.
Okay, yeah, it was a really good class, Reagor aside. Go back to 2019, first receiver wasn't taken until 25th overall. Baltimore, Hollywood Brown, only 2 in the first round that year. N'Keal Harry at 32nd overall. So I think we're going to see 3-4 receivers taken in the first round. Tate, Lemon. I think the rest kind of gets a little more pick your flavor after that, but you're going to see a couple more names taken.
All right. Well, let's circle that back to Omar Cooper Jr. We would have to go team by team, look at needs and blah, blah, blah. But what do you think about the chances of Omar Cooper Jr. falling out of the first round?
It's hard to say, maybe 50-50. I think he's a first round talent, though. I would have no problem taking him in the first round if I was an NFL team in the back half of the first round.
Okay. All right. So just a rabbit for lack of topics to discuss. I wanted to talk about the wide receivers today.
Yeah, I really want to see our grades come together. I'm excited for that this year with our new grading scale. I'll put together probably a big board or at least positional charts to kind of show our grades that I think will give a good window into how we view the strength of classes and what's top heavy and what doesn't have the star talent but has good depth. I think receiver falls in that latter camp. I think that's going to be illuminating because you always think about not just the positions, think about the talent too, and the strength of the class and the grade on the player and your thoughts on the player, and that helps dictate your draft moves a whole lot.
All right, we'll see if the Bills, Colts, Rams, or Steelers are one of the 4 teams once again that have not drafted a wide receiver in the last 10 years, and the Steelers now have the longest streak in the NFL thanks to the Packers last year by taking Golden. Longest streak without a first-round wide receiver.
Yeah, we'll see if Pittsburgh breaks that. Apparently, Tom Pelissero on Rich Eisen's show saying that Pittsburgh had called the Falcons about Kirk Cousins last year. Now, I assume this was before Aaron Rodgers signed. I'm not sure the exact timeline on this, so just kind of noting that to note that if Rodgers' return does not happen, that Pittsburgh may go back to Kirk Cousins. Now, granted, Mike Tomlin no longer the head coach, and so how does the team feel about Kirk Cousins now? But he continues to get some smoke if Rodgers does not circle back.
All right, let's go back to wide receivers real quick. You wrote an article, and we have talked about this throughout last season specifically, and I think even the season before that. Empty route running with wide receivers.
Yeah, that's the phrase that I've termed for guys that, run a lot of routes, but the production isn't there. You look at yards per route run, which is, I think, a pretty useful metric. Talk about efficiency of a player. Clayton Eckert had pulled some data on this. I finally got around and found some space to write about it. And predictably, last year, Pittsburgh did not rank well in this category. Of the 273 wide receivers and tight ends with 50-plus routes, most of Pittsburgh's receivers and threats and targets fell towards the bottom of the chart. DK Metcalf ranked best at 46th overall out of that 273 at 1.83 yards per route run. The tight ends were next in Washington and Frymouth. Washington 54th, Frymouth 88th, and then from there it really got ugly. Calvin Austin 140th overall, Roman Wilson 165, Adam Thielen 226, Jonnu Smith 228, Scotty Miller 240, Marquez Valdez-Scantling 248 out of 273. I know Thielen and Valdez-Scantling that did also, I think, include their time with other teams, San Francisco and Minnesota, but their Pittsburgh numbers were not any better. I can promise you that. And so this has been a pattern. You go back to Van Jefferson. I pulled his numbers last year. He was 0.67 yards per route in his 2024 year. Just a lot of guys that are running routes and not doing much with it. And it kind of makes you feel like you're playing with 10 guys out there sometimes, or 9 guys when you have receivers that just simply aren't making plays. Whose fault is that? Is that offensive scheme? Is that Aaron Rodgers getting the ball out quickly? There's a combination of factors, but I think the talent's not been good enough. And that should change this year with a more vertical and potent passing attack under Mike McCarthy. Certainly needs to change, Dave.
All right. You just brought up an interesting stat with the yards per route run. I guess good study would be go back and look at maybe these last 10 years of college yards per route run for, let's say, first round, second round wide receivers, and how that's translated, especially when you look at the bigger schools, the Power 4, Power 5 at the time type schools, how a lot of those guys translated into the NFL, at the NFL level, with those guys, and circling this back specifically to Omar Cooper Jr. Last year, 2026 specifically, Omar Cooper Jr. had one of the better yards per route run stats in college football at 2.47. You look at Carnell Tate, 2.27. You look at Mekhi Lemon, 3.02 for Lemon. You look at Jordan Tyson, who we talked about, 2.71. You got a guy like we talked about, Denzel Boston, 2.02. Casey Concepcion, 2.03. Who else sticks out on this list? Elijah Surratt, that we talked about out of Indiana, 2.56. He's right up there. And then it goes back to the quarterback play too, right? Both those guys are Indiana guys, obviously. Jeremy Bernard, 1.90, a guy that we've talked a lot about as a potential Pittsburgh Steeler. And then you got a kind of obviously a small school guy, Bryce Lance, 3.07. So I think if you're diving into some of these kind of deeper metrics, if you will, specifically yards per route run for 2026, you've got guys like Surratt and obviously Omar Cooper Jr. and Mekhi Lemon up there, very, very strong producers in that category.
Yeah, I think that helps kind of mitigate what I talked about earlier with the Indiana situations where those guys were not playing in the fourth quarter and not needing to pass a lot late in games, so the opportunities weren't there. We kind of mitigate that by looking at the yards per route run to kind of make it more level and take away that noise of playing in blowout games. And when you do that, it kind of makes Omar Cooper's numbers look better.
All right, so circling this back to the Steelers, we need to see when these wide receivers are on the field, not so many empty routes, and that's something that we talked about, specifically throughout the last couple of seasons here with this team.
Yeah, I don't have a great goal for where it needs to be, but you can't have half of your group in the bottom half and 4 in the bottom 20%. 1 or 2 guys I understand might be a blocker type, might be a number 4, not going to get the ball a lot. I think McCarthy's going to smartly feed his playmakers more so than Arthur Smith did. So you don't need all these guys in the top 50, but it just can't be as ugly as I think it's been the last 2 years, and certainly what the numbers showed in 2025.
And obviously you hope Michael Pittman Jr. plays a big role in that, right?
Yeah, I mean, will his yards per route be incredible if he kind of continues that more dirty work underneath type of receiver? No, I know that Pittsburgh has talked about getting him involved vertically again, and so we'll see exactly how much his usage changes and how much Pittsburgh walks that walk, or if his role stays kind of where it's been. But as long as he's finishing, give me another receiver in the top 120. I mean, only one wide receiver finished in the top 120 in yards per route run last year. That was DK. The next closest was Ben Skoranek at 136. And so you just have that big gap there with all the receivers sitting pretty low. Give me another, give me Pittman in the top 100. Give me that rookie receiver to be probably also right around top 100. Just kind of giving some rough guides on where Pittsburgh needs to be. If you can do those things, your offense is going to improve in a hurry.
All right, for this offense to have the kind of success that the Steelers want it to have, then you probably need 3 of those guys in the top 100, right?
Yeah, I would say so. Again, I'm not trying to be super particular about where it has to be, and you're going to have to be at this exact metric, but just the overall, that chart that I have for 25 needs to look dramatically different, where you just eyeball it after the 26 season and say, okay, there's been a big change there with these guys being more, I call them empty routes. You could just say inefficient route running, whatever you want to couch it as, but just it needs to be a visible change next year.
Well, it shouldn't be so obvious where it sticks out like a sore thumb through halfway through the season, which has obviously been the case that we've talked about the last 2 seasons with this team.
Yeah, right. So I think it will change. I mean, even if Rodgers comes back and some of these throws are shorter, I think you're going to see them push the ball downfield, just have more talent at receiver in general. Those things will naturally bring numbers up.
All right. Okay. What else? Anything else you've written you want to talk about?
No, I'm just kind of working through my small school prospects. We're finishing up small school week. The guys did a great job, so I've kind of worked through. I don't know if anyone has really stuck out. I'm watching more Max Tomczak from Youngstown State. He was at the Ohio State Pro Day too the other day. He worked out there too, in addition to Youngstown State. I like his tape. Dude's got great hands. Dude doesn't drop it. I think he literally had 0 drops last year. This dude catches everything. He might have one of the better hands of any receiver in this draft class, and that's saying something for how good this class is. Tomczak's undersized and lacking strength, but he's a fun study to watch. I'm watching Jacob Clark, the quarterback from Missouri State, technically now FBS. They moved up in 2025. Fun story to bring it full circle. I didn't know this until researching it last night. Jacob Clark, high school teammates with Jackson Smith and Jigba. He was his quarterback in high school down there in Waukewa, Texas. And so those guys could be in the NFL together. Although Clark actually reminds me of very much a poor man's Will Howard. Like, I get a lot of Will Howard vibes from Jacob Clark, but not nearly as impressive because level of competition, and Clark is less athletic and just didn't play against that top quality competition. But if you're looking for kind of this year's Will Howard in a sense, this big, well-built, old-school pocket passer, doesn't have a great arm, doesn't drive the ball with super velocity or force, kind of got a Will Howard feel from Jacob Clark.
All right. One other, we talked about this the other day, kind of winding up some more wide receiver talk here, is the drop passes from the 2026 wide receiver class. I think we hit on some of this the other day. Skylar Bell, the talented wide receiver out of UConn, 24 drops according to PFF last year, 6.9% drop percentage. Casey Concepcion, another guy that's feels like he's a guy, you love or you hate in this draft class. 19 drops, 6.5 percentage. Let's see, another Jordan Tyson, 5% drop rate, 13 drops last year. And then the guys who did not drop a lot of passes, Alabama's Jeremy Bernard, 4 drops, 1.7% drop rate. Mekhi Lemon, 4 drops, 2.2% drop rate. Denzel Boston, 5, and Omar Cooper also 5. Both under 3%. Bryce Lance also 5 drops under 3%. So how much does drop rate matter coming out of college?
Certainly does matter. It's part of that puzzle, just one piece of it. I think you want to look at the tape too and say, for the guys that dropped a lot of passes, why was it a focus issue? Is it a technique issue? Was it over the middle? Was it vertically? Where did they have those drops at? And with Concepcion, I think the book on him.
He needs the brick exercise.
Oh, catching bricks or something? Is that what you're saying? Yeah,
you got to keep his hands closer together.
Yeah. I think he's talked about some of the focus drops last year. Like, I think the book on him is that his hands aren't bad. It's kind of Deontay Johnson, but the hands are good. He can make some tough catches. It's just he has some focus drops and some easy ones. And if you just clean up those kind of things that should be cleaned up and can be cleaned up, then he'll be in a much better place. But of course, has to prove it. So I think Concepcion's a guy you'll be looking at very closely in terms of how teams evaluate his hands.
All right. Okay. Anything else before we get to some emails here that we want to cover today?
No, I think that covers it. I know for maybe the Monday show, we'll talk about Myles Garrett. The Browns said there may be a weird thing with his contract that has a little bit of buzz going right now, but I know you're going to take the weekend to kind of dig into those details. Dave, maybe provide an update on Garrett and his future in Pittsburgh, in Cleveland, I should say, for Monday show.
Yeah, you would think with as much buzz as been around his contract as that been on social media, I would have gone down that rabbit hole to find out what the fuss is all about, but I have yet to do so. But it does kind of feel like, at least on the surface of what I've quickly read up on it, that are they at least keeping the door open to potentially trade him, even though he has a no trade clause, I believe, in his contract? Is this setting him up for at least later this? Because they pushed the date back on that until right before the start of the season, right? As far as the decision on whether or not how they exercise the option bonus and whether or not they prorate it.
Yeah, they got moved back from March to right around the start of the regular season or sometime in September. So kind of some interesting
It's not
thoughts
that
on
he's not going to get the money. It's just how what
when he gets paid.
yeah, the mechanism and potentially the proration of it. I think is the most curious thing.
Right, and why is Garrett doing this? What is the incentive for him to delay his own payment? And we'll talk about that more maybe for
All
Monday's
right.
show.
All right, let us get to some emails here. And pulling up the email machine right now. We will start with Tyler Goliford. Hello, David Knox. What is the thought process when it comes to picking between mid-round project style quarterbacks? It's a broad question, but when I ask this, I'm thinking about Drew Aller versus Cole Payton in the mid rounds, assuming they're both still on the board. Do you look mainly at upside? How do you weigh the fact that Aller is closer to being a finished product, both good and bad, versus Payton being like a ball of clay with potentially fewer bad habits? Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think the two quarterbacks that you pointed out there, we kind of mentioned loosely earlier in the show here. Drew Aller, you obviously have a lot more tape on and against tougher competition than you do a guy like Cole Payton. Uh, I think a lot of your decision, yeah, I would start with Drew Aller. You probably got a better read on about what his ceiling is compared to maybe a Cole Payton. And you also with Drew Aller, you probably have a better sense of where his floor is as opposed to a Cole Payton. And it also depends on what style of offense they've run, how much under center, how much pro style versus RPO heavy type stuff and all. I think there's a lot of consideration that needs to be made, specifically when it comes to two specific guys like Drew Aller. If you want to go the more kind of safe route, well, we know what we're getting, we know what the low side is, but unfortunately, we kind of seeing him what his ceiling is as well too, versus a guy like Cole Payton where you have probably a larger variance, and also you don't have really the competition aspect, and you obviously have fewer starting games. I guess it's all about kind of the risk factor, right?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think my overall approach, and I've said before, I'm usually all in or all out with quarterbacks. Either take one in the first or don't take one at all. Because if you don't think he's a franchise guy in the first round, then kind of what are we doing here? But if you're going to take that quarterback in the mid rounds, I think you want to look for the upside in the traits, somebody to develop. I think you'll hire Mike McCarthy because you believe he's a guy that can develop quarterbacks, maybe clean them up mechanically, help them understand the game, how to read it, how to process it, how to think about the quarterback position. He can do all those things. He can't make somebody's arm better. He can't make somebody more athletic. He can't really improve a lot of physical traits other than mechanics that can often help improve accuracy, maybe, tighten up your base and all those kinds of things to make you physically better. But you get my point overall. So I think you want to bet on some traits here because you have a guy that you hired specifically to develop and mold that quarterback. Now, it doesn't mean that Drew Aller can't be in that equation. Physically, he has a lot of tools. He's a big guy. He's got a good arm. Like, you can work with some things there if you think he just has to clean up mechanics or, work on one or two things that may transform his game. But I think you want to stay away from the guys you believe are more finished products, maybe the Carson Becks or the physical arm talent, quote unquote, isn't quite as there. And he started a bunch of games. So how much better is this guy going to get? And certainly for guys like Cole Payton that have a lot of talent and upside and ability, but not a lot of experience. And mechanically, I think Payton's kind of a mess right now. Those are guys you probably gravitate towards under the belief that McCarthy can fix them, improve them, and get the most out of their potential.
All right. Good answer. Paul Lutz writes in, inside linebacker. Hello, gentlemen. Excellent job as always. Alex made a very good point about middle linebacker in the last podcast. All right, you get some kudos here.
My $20 bill is in the mail on that one.
All right, in the last podcast, we're talking about his mock draft with the new coaching staff. Do you believe it's possible that they think the pieces are there? However, comma, I like when people write in there, however, comma, they were utilized incorrectly in the Tomlin/Austin system. I've wondered that for a few years now because they've struggled with their middle linebacker group ever since Ryan Shazier was injured. It's almost as if his athleticism allowed the old system to work and is not repeatable. So could it be that it's not necessarily the personnel aren't correct, but the system itself was hindering the position group?
It's one of those questions I wish I had a good answer to. We'll have to find out based on the moves they make and the moves they don't make. I think the point that he's referring to is whenever I said Pittsburgh could have retooled their inside linebacker room, they could have traded Patrick Queen or moved on. They could have cut Malik Harrison. They didn't have to bring back Cole Holcomb. They so far decided to do all those things, bring back Holcomb, keep Harrison, and hold on to Patrick Queen. So that tells me they like that room. They like what that room can bring. So either they believe that schematically there are some things that can be improved, or they believe that improving the defensive line can help unlock those guys to run and chase players to Queen and Peyton Wilson are to keep them clean. If they stay clean, they'll be a lot more productive. So we'll have to wait and see. They still certainly could draft an off-ball linebacker because Queen's in a contract year and Wilson's not taking the steps that have been necessary. So we'll have to kind of evaluate those things on the other side of the draft.
Yep. Let's see. Here's one from a name I don't recognize, Anthony Hotujek. Thank you for the pronunciation there, Anthony. Thanks for providing another great offseason of Steelers coverage as usual. My question for you guys is, who are your favorite special teams demons to keep an eye on in the late rounds of the draft? I know Danny Smith isn't around to be thumping the table for players, but losing Killebrew, Peppers, and Connor Hayward seems to leave a decent hole to be filled. Yeah, and throw in the fact that James Pierre, one of the better gunners, I think in the NFL, is gone as well too, and Killebrew gone. Peppers was I wouldn't call him a premier special teams player, but he was utilized as the up back right after Killebrew went down, and Connor Hayward obviously a good special teams player. I have not gotten to the point of the pre-draft process where I'm thinking, you know what, this is a premier 6th, 7th round special teams player yet. Alex, do you have anybody that you've come across that you're saying, you know what, this guy is a fantastic special teams player?
I'll have to check, and this will also be important, I think, for our big board or however we format it. We have a special team grade for prospects this year. If we believe that there's a real good standout trait or background on special teams, you can get that as part of our grading tags. You get the numerical score of whatever 8.0 with a special teams tag. I've only given that to a few guys so far this year. I think one guy, and I mentioned him a million times before, so sorry for being a broken record, but Kendrick Law is that receiver, gunner, coverage guy. Some return value. I think he has a skill set to be a more productive NFL returner than he was in college. So that's one name that comes to mind. I mean, there are guys with skill sets. Red Murdoch from Buffalo, I think, is a thumper, could do well there. You know, if Aiden Fisher's going to make it from Indiana, that's going to be his path. I don't know if he's going to be a pure ace type of guy, but that's going to be kind of his path to sticking. Michael Taft from Texas, I love this story. Walk on, he was running routes at the pro day just to give quarterback somebody to throw to. Kind of love the all-in nature of this guy. So we'll have to kind of go through it and tally up and continue to write some reports. Even though he's not a special teamer, I love that Monroe Freeling, the first round likely tackle from Georgia, was on the punt team, and he was on because they had a shield punt, and so you get some offensive linemen on those. He was covering punts and blocking on punts, so it just kind of tells me the athlete that he is, and he ran sub-5 at the NFL Combine. So, yeah, I'll have to go down through our list here, but I think, the first name that came to mind whenever you said that was Kendrick Law from Kentucky.
All right. Our buddy Lenny Barsikowski back in here. We hear from Lenny every now and then. He says, I really like Alex's mock. What percent chance do you give us for trading up versus trading down this year? Also, is it crazy to trade down in the first round and receive a pick for next year? I feel we want to draft a quarterback next year. It would help our ability to trade up. How different would our approach be in this draft if just these three players would have panned out for us? The three players, Dotson, Romeo Wilson,
Romeo, like Roman Wilson?
he's got Romeo Wilson here.
All right, so assume that's Roman.
Broderick Jones. He says, how different would our approach in this year's draft be just if Dotson, Wilson, and Broderick Jones would have played out? Let's take the first part first about the trading up and trading down. If you're talking about trading up versus trading down in the first round of the draft, I'll continue and having history on my side saying you're better off probably thinking that this team will trade down versus trading up. If this team were to trade down, you're trading down because you still have one of X amount of players that you have no problem taking as a result of the trade down here. So if now moving on past the first round, I think there is a strong chance that this team, in fact, if this team were to, the first trade that this team makes in this year's draft, if they do indeed make a trade during this year's draft, in my opinion, is likely up. But I view that as being potentially second or third round overall there. I don't like the chances of them trading up in the first round. Quite honestly, I don't think they're going to trade up, or I think they're just going to stand put from where I sit right now at 21 overall. But that you would probably agree with my thoughts as far as first round, and potentially if they were to trade up or down anywhere with their first trade in this draft, it would likely be up, right?
What tells you they're less likely to trade up in the first round in the draft?
I just don't know if you're getting yourself into that realm of top 10 play. I don't think they're going to be willing to go up as far as they need to go up to get a guy that they really love.
What about a small trade like Omar Khan's first trade, going up 3 spots for Broderick Jones, 17 to 14?
I don't think that they're going to be. I don't think there's a player that they would do that for.
Okay. Yeah, maybe it's so these things are always hard to know and judge until you're kind of there in the moment. We always talk about what are the offers, what's on the board. I would answer it two ways. If Pittsburgh's going to be trading confined just to the 26th draft, they're going to go up. Like, there's no need to trade down and get more picks. They have 12 picks. They have 5 in the top 100. They have 3 7th-round picks. There's no need to trade down in the second round unless you just get some incredible offer if it's just for 26 capital. Could they trade for 27 capital? I'm sure they would love to. I'm sure the entire NFL would love to get 27 capital because that seems to be the thought that most teams have. So the question is not about will Pittsburgh want to do it, but who's buying, who's coming up, who's there to come up for, and what teams are willing to give away premium 2027 draft picks. So they do, if they do trade down, then you think it would have to be for 27 capital because there's no need to be adding more 26 capital. I think you're going to see them trade up in this draft. They have 12 picks. I said I think they're going to make about 10. I mean, 2 picks are going to be traded away. What that looks like, who knows? But I think confined to the 26th draft, you're going to see this team go up, not down.
All right. About the 3 players he mentions here, Dotson, Roman Wilson, and Broderick Jones. Obviously, looking back in the rearview mirror at this point, now you would have to, I guess, assume that Dotson would have been given a second contract at this point, right?
He would have to be. Yeah, he's been in the league for several years.
All right. So that's
6 years.
And I would assume that you would have had him at right guard, and you would have to also be under the assumption that you still would have drafted Mason McCormick and maybe played him at left guard. So it's a little dirtier when including Dotson in this conversation. Obviously, if you're looking at this point of guys like Roman Wilson and Broderick Jones, I mean, if Broderick Jones is playing at a first round pick level at this point and been healthy at this point, you're not at all entertaining, especially on the heels of Troy Fautano being drafted a couple years ago. You're not looking at tackle altogether, and if there's a lot to consider with even if Roman Wilson had done anything more than what he's done at this point, would this team still have gone out and gotten a guy like Michael Pittman Jr.? Uh, it's just real murky to look back at in the rearview mirror about how those three players specifically would have changed the approach to this year's draft, because you have other draft classes that have come in since then, as we mentioned. Fautano, you've traded for Pittman. You obviously drafted Mason McCormick. You see where I'm going with this answer?
Mhm. Yeah, it's so hard to think about, that butterfly effect of this guy works out, if this change happens, especially with Dotson, like you said, because it was so many years ago, and the domino effect that comes off of that. But obviously, if Broderick Jones was healthy and had a great season, then we're not talking about left tackle, and you feel like you can really center in on left guard and upgrade there, and then you're good to go and really happy about that group of five going forward. So if Roman Wilson was killing it, then you got three receivers of Pittman and Roman and Metcalf, and receiver becomes less of a need. The board really starts to open up. I just wonder if Jones was healthy, what that conversation would look like. Because I think the fifth year option comes back into play. We have a good conversation about that. But with the neck injury, that may be off the table now. So yeah, they're all fair questions. It's just possible to answer. It would help, obviously, if somebody was playing really well. It would be one less hole, one less thing to worry about. I just always think back to just a separate point or adjacent point. What if Ryan Shazier did not get hurt? Kind of the domino effect there. Go from Shazier to this team trading up for Devin Bush and that not working out, giving up a lot of capital for him, kind of chasing and having to invest a lot in inside linebacker, Patrick Queen contract, and
George
Shazier's.
Pickens.
Yeah, had Pickens not been, the head case that he was, what that would have looked like. So, but of course, George Pickens, if he wasn't the head case, would he have been as good a player? I think sometimes those guys kind of go hand in hand. They're crazy, kind of works for them sometimes the way that they're just wired. So, yeah, there's a lot of what ifs there.
All right, Brett Nile will end with this one. He says, as you may know, the Montana State University Bobcats won the FCS National Championship this year. There are a couple players from that squad that I think may make interesting late-round picks, and I'd like to request that Steelers Depot does a draft profile for at least two of them. Offensive lineman Titan Fleshman. He played left tackle, previously played by Dylan Cook. Athletic, could be a late-round steal. He's an FCS All-American. Wide receiver Taco Dowler. He was a weapon in that offense, a Wes Welker type of player, but he was absolutely electric as the kickoff and punt returner. No shortage of production, and could be a huge special teams weapon and developmental receiver. There's also running back Julius Davis, who was tough to bring down. He's a height, weight, but not speed guy. Might be worth looking as an undrafted free agent. He would like us to take a look at them and tell your thoughts. I don't know. We're winding up small school week this week, right?
We are, but funny you mentioned that. This is swear in my notes here. I'm looking at my Discord notes I keep to myself right now. I have a Montana State guy planned to profile, not one of those three names. Maybe we'll get to them. The returner sounds interesting, but Kenneth Eden is at the fourth. IV, my Roman numeral knowledge is a little bit shaky, but he was an outside linebacker. I think he had 8 sacks last year, and of course was coached by Sean Howe, who is now Pittsburgh's defensive assistant. And so I kind of wanted there to be a connection there. So I want to dig into his tape and get Eden's tape looked at.
All right, Brett, with our small school week winding down this week here, probably not a good chance that we get to guys like Flashman or who was the other, Taco Dowler that he mentioned there.
Yeah, but we'll keep an eye on it. Maybe we'll look at the returner, but we certainly will have eyes wide open for these guys, and we'll get to at least one Montana State Bobcat this year.
All right, winding things up here on this Friday. What did everybody think about the wide receiver discussion? I guess a better way to put it, is there anybody we'll ask the listeners this: is there anybody that could potentially be that most of you feel could potentially be on the board at 21st overall at the wide receiver position that you're absolutely banging the table for? Is it a Makai Lemon type guy? Is it Omar Cooper Jr.? What do you think about the positional value, especially when it comes to this class of wide receivers? How many? Which of the? I'm just going to kind of leave it very open ended to kind of invite some emails here. What do you think about the let's say the top of the wide receiver class? How many of these guys scream that 3 or 4 years from now that we're talking about mega contracts for in this wide receiver class? How many of you out there kind of feel the way that I do, that the sweet spot maybe with this wide receiver class this year, specifically when we're talking about the Steelers, is in the second round at some point, maybe a trade up of some sort there. So just kind of want to get the kind of feel positionally from the listeners about the kind of encompassed chat that we had about the wide receiver position when it comes to this year's draft class here. So that I've given plenty of you. Those are the kind of emails that we want to read this week, especially going into the weekend and into Monday. So feel free to chime in anywhere in that subject matter when it comes to wide receivers, and maybe we'll read a few of those on the Monday show there. So in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button and follow the directions that way. Monday, we'll start putting really a bow around these pro day sightings. Hopefully we'll have maybe a few more pre-draft visitors to talk about within there, and obviously maybe we'll have some contract data on Brock Hoffman and
Michael Pittman. Maybe get the Pittman contract details.
I think we do. I think we already covered that.
Did we? Okay, maybe I'm misremembering.
We have that. We don't have the new running back, though. We don't have the details on that 1-year deal, but I imagine that's going to come in. I think both him and Hoffman are going to come in cheap. It's just getting the specifics of them out there. Overall, we're waiting still to find out if Darnell Savage is indeed going to become a Pittsburgh Steelers. I know we talked a little bit about that the other day as well, too. So we'll see what the weekend brings us here, and we'll talk about on Monday whatever the weekend does bring us, and maybe a little bit more. So as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.